Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to be waiting for another 2 or 3 minutes, so please bear with us. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Jasveer Singh. I'm the chair of the British Sikh Report. Unfortunately, for some reason, the video isn't working on my laptop, so I'm afraid you're just going to have to listen to my voice rather than see me in person, and I do apologise for that. Hopefully, I'm going to share now the link to the British Sikh Report, so it has now officially been launched. And it is now available on our website. So if you do wish to download it, you can simply visit our website, which is britishsikhreport.org, and it should be ready for you to download from our website. So please do visit britishsikhreport.org, and you should be able to download it as of now. Thank you very much for joining us at the launch of the 8th annual British Sikh Report. We were initially planning to launch the British Sikh Reports 2020, as we normally do, in Parliament in the spring. Unfortunately, the impact of the pandemic was huge, and it meant that we were unable to have the launch in the usual way. We also delayed our launch by a few months in the hope that we could have an event in Parliament. Little did we think that we would still be in the grips of the pandemic in November 2020, but there we have it. So like virtually everything this year, we've decided to launch the British Sikh Report in that very 2020 way by doing it over Zoom. We're thankful to all of our supporting partners, namely City Sikhs, the Sikh Assembly, and the NHS Blood and Transplant. We've come a very long way since our very first report in 2013, and we've always endeavoured to provide robust, reliable data about the British Sikh community from our very beginnings. So why are documents like the British Sikh Report of such significance? The answer, the simple answer, is that people like numbers. It makes it easier to understand the specific issues affecting a particular community. This year, we've focused on a variety of diverse and topical issues, and you'll be hearing about some of those issues as the evening goes on. Issues such as organ donation and the fact that 53% of Sikhs know of the law change which took place in 2020 relating to the opt-out, and 60% are happy with the change, as well as 2/3 of people considering organ donation to be a form of seva. Or loneliness, the fact that this impacts more on the younger age groups, according to our statistics, and declines with age, and those who are not in relationships, or are the ones who are significantly more lonely or feel left out. The fact that when it comes to relationship and sex education in schools, there's a high support for this, but it declines with age, with 37% of people wanting the right to withdraw children and 48% not wanting to have the right to withdraw children from that source of education. We then also have information about accommodation, the fact that 45% of people who responded live in fully owned homes, 29% are buying their property with a mortgage, and just 11% of British Sikhs live in rented accommodation. So there's a lot of information contained within the British Sikh Report. I do hope you get some time to read through it carefully, to understand what it contains. And I'm certain that as you read through the pages, you'll discover aspects of the British Sikh community that you'll find interesting, intriguing, and perhaps even surprising. It reflects the true diversity of the British Sikh community. And we hope that this information will help guide policymakers, charities, and public bodies, as well as the Sikh community itself, when it comes to issues affecting British Sikhs in the challenging times that we exist in, as well as the challenging times ahead. Without any further ado, I'm now going to hand over to Jagdev Singh Virdi. Jagdev is the editor of the British Sikh Report. He is also one of the leading statisticians in the global Sikh community, and we are very privileged to have his help and support over the years. Jagdev, over to you.
Thank you, Jasveer, and welcome everybody to this launch. Can I share the screen? Jasveer, I need to share my screen. It says host is disabled participant screen sharing.
Yes, I'm just going to make you the host now. So you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay. Thank you. Let's go to that mode. Okay, can everybody see my screen now? Okay, so when we put together the statistics for the British Sikh Report, my background is in official statistics with the Office for National Statistics and the UK Statistics Authority. So I try to apply the principles of the Code of Practice for Official Statistics, which has three key pillars. Just that statistics should be trustworthy, so to instill confidence in people that are using and producing statistics. They should be of high quality, so that the data and the methods that are used are do result in good quality assured statistics, and that they should provide value. So statistics that support society's needs for information, their value for money, their value for quality. All of these pillars should be met. And those are very much the principles we try to apply when we're putting together the British Sikh Report. Now, this year's survey, some of what I'm going to say, Jasveer has already covered briefly. But the survey was primarily conducted online through social media and other sort of mailing lists and websites, through various Sikh and Punjabi organisations and community groups. We monitor the responses as they come in, looking at the breakdown by age, gender, marital status, the regions of the country. We often have a shortfall in the elderly, and we address that to meet the shortfall by getting paper forms and going to gurdwaras or day centres for the elderly and getting responses in that way. All the responses are quality assured, and we do have to reject quite a lot because there are people who fill in silly responses deliberately. But after the data has been cleaned and so on, we this year ended up with a sample of 2,700 good quality responses, and there's always room for improvement. So each year over the last few years, we've been increasing the sample. Last year was 2,500. The year before was just over 2,000, I think. So each year we've increased the sample size, and this is actually quite a good sample size. A lot of the opinion surveys you see or opinion polls during elections, they're often based on a sample of just 1,000. And so the fact that we're getting 2,700 good quality representative sample is actually quite good. We're grateful to all the team members who helped with the report, and they're all listed on page 53. I hope I haven't missed anybody. And this is all, the work is all done in the spirit of seva and volunteering and giving people's valuable time. Some people work on the initial data analysis, some on the topic writing or drafting, some on the design of the report. They all were essential contributions, and I sort of stitch everything together at the end of the day, as well as looking after the initial survey and the data as it's coming in. This year, the survey covered key issues affecting British Sikhs, as always. Organ donation was covered last year as well, but this year we've moved on to covering the change in the law. We collected data on people's voting in the general election last December, which is something new that we haven't done before. We collected data on accommodation, whether people own their homes or rent them, data on crime and fear of crime, data on marriages and weddings, relationship and sex education in schools, the people's attitudes towards Sikh faith schools in the area, disability, loneliness, people's connections with Punjab and India, the issues of drug abuse in Punjab, and people's attitudes towards different forms of arts. We always, for the last few years, have been collecting data on identity, ethnicity, observance of 5Ks, whether people are wearing the star, whether they're Amritdhari or not, so we continue with that. And also the general demographic information on age, gender, marital status, and so on, and employment qualifications. So I'm just going to skim through some of the highlights, not all of them. We have somebody else who's going to speak later about organ donation, so I was consciously not going to cover organ donation, but Jagbi Jyoti Jahal, who's written an article on organ donation, that article is in this publication, and she hasn't joined us online yet because she was coming to us from another meeting, but I'm going to leave her to talk about organ donation when she arrives. Okay, so just to start off with this through the topic. So we asked people whether they're Amritdhari or not, and 11% are Amritdhari, and it's much higher, 25% in the over 65s, and fewer in the younger age groups. We're actually higher in the very youngest age group compared to the next one up, so in the 19 or less. Looking at voting in the 2019 general election, 78% people said that they voted, and there's another quite a few percent who said that they didn't want to say, they preferred not to say whether they voted or not. 45% of the total said that they had voted Labour and 22% Conservative, but it varied quite a lot by age. So if you look on the chart at the top, the red lines are by age group are for Labour, and the blue lines on the right are Conservative, and the other parties are in between. And you see where the eldest is the lowest percentage voting Labour and the highest voting Conservative. And that actually reflects the pattern in the general election, sort of the UK population as a whole, which is in the lower chart. That's information from YouGov poll. So the pattern is similar, but the overall percentage is shifted so that there's a higher percentage voting Labour amongst Sikhs. Also by gender, higher percentage of women voting Labour and lower percentage of women voting Conservative. Turning to accommodation next, and looking at it by age, and also as we mentioned at the beginning, I mean, overall 45% of people wholly, completely own their properties outright, and another 29% are buying with mortgage, but only 11% are living in rented accommodation. And of those, mostly they're renting from private landlords, very few in housing association or council sort of housing, and very few in part-owned, part sort of rent shared ownership schemes. With the elder sort of groups, those aged 65 and over, it's around 85% that is only sort of owning, and another 5% or so were still buying with a mortgage. Crime and fear of crime. Actually, most Sikhs, around sort of 70%, have not suffered crime. We asked whether they suffered crime since 2016, so in the last 4 years or so, and before. And actually, a lot of them said never. But there are some that those who said that they have, it actually again reduces by age. So those who are reporting crime, they tend to be higher in the 20 to 34-year-old age group for the longer period before 2016, and since 2016 the highest is the 19 years old or lower. Then we asked questions about marriages, and as you might expect, looking at it by age, the older you get, the more likely that you are going to be married, with the rates of marriage around 85% for the 65 and over, sorry, nearly 90%. But there's a trend that people are getting married later and later if they are getting married. And we also asked, how did you meet your partner, whether you're married or in a civil partnership? Quite a high percentage overall, about 40-odd% who had arranged marriages, but that again declining as with the younger age groups, and very high for the older age groups. So 80% of those aged 65 and over had arranged marriages, but actually much lower for the younger age groups. We asked people how much did their weddings cost. And this, in the top chart, you see 4 blocks of figures there, and they're for each sort of age band. So the first band on the left is for 20 to 34-year-olds, where the range spreads from less than £10,000 to over 100,000. And there's the full spread, so that there are about 3% of people who said that their wedding costs more than 100,000. But as the age groups get sort of older, you find lower spend. So 65 and over, there was nobody who spent more than 30,000 on their wedding. And that's explained partly by inflation, because their wedding would have happened many years ago, or their marriage might have been, or the wedding might have been in India or somewhere else before they came to this country with much lower costs. So they're not unexpected results, but interesting to confirm that with people's actual sort of information that people have provided. We also asked what was the most expensive part of your wedding, and again varying by age. So for the older age groups, the Anandkar is the day of the wedding with the lunch and the breakfast. That was the most expensive part. Whereas for the younger age groups, it's very much about the reception, which becomes the most expensive part. And for some people, the honeymoon is the most expensive part. For the small percentage, there's still the element of giving the dowry or the daj. So, but interesting results there, though. And it'll be interesting to see now this year with the COVID and the restrictions on the sizes of the weddings and so on, what these results will look like next year if you ask people about any wedding that happened this year. Because from the traditional 400 or 500 people at a wedding, the last month or so is restricted to 15 people. Now, obviously, this month we can't have any. But it'll be interesting to see how costs have been affected by this year. It's a COVID sort of pandemic. We asked about the teaching of relationships and sex education in schools. People's views about that. Majority do support, if you look at the top chart. So that the first block is those who are saying yes, but the bars within that block are by age, and the older the age group, the lower the support there is. So that's a sort of a finding that the older you are, the less support there is for sex education and relationship education in schools. But nevertheless, there's quite a high percentage overall that do support it. So we asked that question about different types of relationships. So the example at the top is single parent families, and the one lower down is about families with same-sex parents. And so there the overall sort of chart is depressed, so lower support, but it's still majority is in support. There have been protests in Birmingham outside schools, and we asked people about their views about the protests. Majority don't agree with the protests, but there's more agreement from the older groups and more agreement from men than women. And also by gender, yeah, so those charts, the first one shows by age and the second one by gender. We asked about faith schools. Is there a Sikh faith school in your area? And given that there quite a large majority of our population, the Sikh population in the UK, is concentrated in certain towns and cities. So about half did actually say, yes, there is a faith school in their area. And of those who said that they're Amritdhari, even a higher percentage, so 64% said that there's a Sikh school in their area. We also asked, do you think there should be a Sikh faith school in your area? And again, it's quite a lot of support for that. With the Amritdhari people, actually 72% support. With the Sikhs as a whole, 54% support. Yeah, so that's another thing that could be useful information to provide a case for where there are parts of the country where there aren't any Sikh faith schools and people are campaigning. This is information that should be of use to them. We asked about people's the factors that people take into account when choosing school for their children, and the highest, so the most important factor was educational achievements of the school. Second was the location and proximity, and then the range of facilities and so on. And actually the faith ethos had support about 12%, so it wasn't the highest, but it was one of the categories there. But as you see, the most important thing was the educational achievements of the school. Questions on disability. We asked about people's whether they are disabled, and if they are, then more information about their experiences. So of those who said that they are disabled, about half of them said they have a physical disability, and about 18% said they have mental health issues. But we also asked about other types, like hearing impairment, visual, autism, learning disabilities. So the report shows the statistics for all of those different types of impairments. We asked about whether people with disabilities and the families, whether they receive any assistance from social services. And about half are looked after by the family, this is what they reported. About a quarter have some assistance from either social services or community voluntary organisations or carers that they've privately organised, or they get some financial assistance from the state. So a bit of a spread there, but that total amounts to about a quarter. Not on this chart, but also in the report, is that about 19% get some respite care for their carers. We asked about loneliness, and again, variation by age. We might have expected higher loneliness among the elderly, but it's actually the other way around. The level of people who say that they're often or some of the time lonely declines with age. And those who are saying they're hardly ever lonely, that percentage increases with age. And there might be a little bit of factor in here of the very elderly, maybe underrepresented in the sample, but the trend is actually there for the whole of the age range from 19 or less all the way out. With each age group, there's a trend in one direction. And also those in relationships, so those who are married or in a civil partnership, they have they're the least sort of lonely, and those who are not report the highest loneliness and lack of companionship. Then we asked about issues of concern in Punjab to people. And the two highest issues that came out were drugs and alcohol and corruption. But also, not far behind was the environment and human rights issues, followed by the economy of the Punjab and education. And some questions about arts, people's interest in arts, what type of arts do they enjoy, that are related to Punjab, India, Sikhs. Top of the list actually came film and cinema, but second was Sikh religious paintings and art. And then there's a whole list there that you can see in the report with the decreasing interest. So that was just a summary of some of the findings from the report. You can see the full report at BritishSikhReport.org, as Jasveer has already mentioned, and it's there now, I believe. So I'm going to finish there. Yes, back to you, Jasveer. And if I can keep sharing the screen, because the next slide is for Jagbir, who's going to be speaking next.
Thank you, Jagdev. I'm actually going to go to Munira Wilson, MP.
Okay.
So if we stop sharing the slide, and then I'll invite Munira Wilson to just say a few words about the British Sikh Report 2020. Munira, over to you. Munira is the MP for Twickenham, and she is a Liberal Democrat MP. Munira.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me today. Sorry I wasn't there right at the start, but I did hear some of the presentation, and I should start by saying Sat Sri Akal to everybody. Very interesting to hear some of the insights from the report. I was personally particularly interested to hear about how much people spend on their weddings, just because that's quite an interesting bit of information, particularly in the Asian culture. I know that you do see some a beautiful wedding, so I was just interested to see that. But also I happen to be the Liberal Democrats Health and Social Care spokesperson, so on a serious note, I was very interested, particularly in the slide you showed about those who've got family members with caring needs, that they're largely looked after by their families, and unpaid carers is an issue that I and my party leader Ed Davey have been particularly focusing on, and an issue and a part of society that we really want to champion, because we feel the needs are overlooked. So I wanted to reflect on the importance of this report, and of course how it's obviously very appropriate that it's following the Bandi Chor, the celebration of liberation from the Mughals, led by the 6th Sikh Guru Har Gobind, a celebration of the right of freedom of religion, faith, politics, creed, and individual expression. And those are fundamental human rights and values that are very precious to me as a Liberal Democrat, and also to my colleague. And we continue to press the government to uphold and maintain these rights. And we fully support efforts to promote freedom of religion for all groups, and will continue to raise these issues in Parliament to ensure that the rights of all are upheld and protected. However, as I'm sure many of you will be aware, that there remain circumstances where the fundamental human rights of British Sikhs are under threat. And in particular, I'm thinking of the tragic and awful circumstances of Mr. Jagdar Singh Johal's detention in India. It is something that my colleagues have been campaigning about in terms of challenging his detention and advocating that there's no place for the use of torture or mistreatment anywhere in the world. And we are very concerned to hear that he's been subjected to torture. We'll continue to support his local MP, Martin Doherty Hughes, and Preet Kaur Gill in all that they've been doing to try and obtain justice for him. We've signed cross-party letters calling on both the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary to use diplomatic and legal means to ensure that he gets a fair trial and investigation, and that they investigate the torture allegations as a matter of urgency. We continue to press both of them. and we must work to ensure that the government of India abides by the rule of law, which is so precious to us. I also just wanted to say a few words, obviously in my capacity as Liberal Democrat health spokesperson. I've been very focused on the pandemic and how both government and wider civil society have responded over the last 9 months or so. And I've really been struck time and again by the love, the generosity, and all the acts of seva that we've seen from our faith communities across the UK during the pandemic. And I've been really impressed by the ability of Gurudwaras to adapt to these challenging times, staying connected to worshippers and providing support. And my heartfelt thanks go out to the British Sikh community for your contribution at this time. I should also obviously recognise as health spokesperson the disproportionate impact the pandemic has had on Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. I continue to press the government to make sure that they are putting the right provisions and protection in place for those communities, and not least as we look towards potentially a vaccine coming forward, and how our BAME communities are prioritised in that. The British Sikh community has also contributed so significantly in the UK, both in the past and not just at the moment. Obviously, we've just recently marked Remembrance Sunday on the 8th of November. It's deeply important that we remember the sacrifice of the 83,000 Sikhs who gave their lives to Great Britain over the course of both world wars and their inspirational courage. As a multicultural country, it's vital we remember all who fought and died during the world wars. The UK and the Sikhs have a long and rich history, so it's right that the community is showcased more in the politics and in the media through events like the British Sikh Report. So thank you again for having me today, and I look forward to hearing some of the other contributors, although you'll forgive me, I probably will have to dial off early because I've got childcare commitments because my husband's got to go into another meeting and I've got to put the kids to bed shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Munira, thank you so much for your kind words. It's been a pleasure having you this evening, and thank you for joining us at the London South of England launch of the British Sikh Report. I'm now going to hand over to... You're welcome. I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Jagbir Jyoti Johal. Dr. Jyoti Johal is a senior lecturer in Sikh Studies at the University of Birmingham, and she is the author of our article this year. Jagbir, over to you.
Thank you, Jasper. Right, so I'm just going to recap the article that I have written. And one of the important stories in that article that I would like everybody to kind of focus on with respect to organisation is the story of Anaya. And there's a little, on that slide, there's an image of Anaya celebrating Diwali last weekend, after having a successful organ donation transplant last year. So anyway, until recently in the United Kingdom, organ donation relied on donors opting in by joining the donor register, or a family consenting to donation when a loved one had died. The Organ Donation Deemed Consent Act 2019, approved by Parliament, which received royal assent on the 15th of March 2019, came into effect in England in May 2020. Changes that and organ donation in England moved to an opt-out system referred to as Max and Kira's Law, named after Kira Ball and Max Johnson. Kira Ball was 9, was killed in a road traffic accident in the summer of 2017. Kira's organs helped 4 people. Her kidneys went to 2 adults, her liver went to a baby, and her heart went to 9-year-old Max Johnson, who had heart failure caused by a viral infection. Max and his family campaigned in favour of an opt-out system for organ donation. The new system moves away from an opt-in system of consent to donating organs to a soft opt-out system, which means that all adults in England are considered to have agreed to be an organ donor when they die, unless they have recorded a decision not to donate. It is hoped that this new legislation will increase and improve the organ donation process so that more lives are benefited and saved. From the BSR report, it was clear, we asked, did you know the organ donation law was changing in 2020? And 51% of respondents said that they did know. However, this varied by age group, with those aged between 50 and 64 showing the highest level of awareness, and 59%, while the level of with a level of awareness decreased with the younger age groups. In recent years, there has been a number of Sikh faith-based public education campaigns and donor registration initiatives have played a vital role in trying to improve the uptake of registering for organ donation in the Sikh community. As Sikhs celebrated the 550th birth anniversary of Guru Nanak, the founder of the Sikh faith, in 2019, it coincided with a remarkable year of activism promoting organ donation within the Sikh community. Now, Guru Nanak's teachings, which emphasize spiritual wisdom, righteous living, and responsibility towards God and its creation, have been embraced to advocate for organ donation. Guru Nanak advocated for a sense of duty and way of life achieved through practicing three core principles: Naam Japna, recitation of God's name; Geet Karna, earning an honest living; and Vand Shakna, selfless service. These core practices are both internal and external practices that enable spiritual growth and facilitate moral and ethical living. They emphasize an individual's social responsibility to ensure the well-being of society. The last core teaching, Vand Shakna, is most pertinent here to highlight how Sikh teachings should be seen as a strong advocate for organ donation, because Sikhs fundamentally believe that the body and organs are simply mechanisms to allow the eternal soul to experience life during this age of existence. Sikh teachings place a great emphasis on seva and altruism, and Sikhs engage in three forms of seva. Seva rendered through one's body, tan; seva rendered through one's mind, man; and seva rendered through giving of one's material wealth, dhan. While all three forms of seva are considered equally important, the Sikh gurus stress that all seva should be a labor of love performed without desire, nishkam, without intention, nishkpat, and with humility, nimrata. Now, in 2019, to mark the 550th birth anniversary of Guru Nanak, and most recently in 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen countless Sikhs all over the world carrying out volunteer charity work with this ethos firmly embedded within their actions. And this is also then firmly embedded in the whole notion of donating organs to others to alleviate suffering. Now, this activism and advocacy has come in the form of individual focus campaigns, group campaigns, but also Gurdwara campaigns. In terms of individual focus campaigns, there have been a number on social media, like a kidney for Simran, match for Meena, and, as I've already mentioned, hope for Anaya. Alongside the aforementioned individual campaigns that are focused on the need for organ donation, there have been a remarkable efforts to promote awareness of the experiences of organ donation. A number of foundations have been set up to promote organ donation among Sikhs and other minority communities. One that stands out is the Mandeep Muddar Memorial Foundation. In terms of Gurdwaras, in 2019, Sri Guru Singh Sabha Saifo and Sikh Welfare and Research Trust engaged in an organ donation campaign with NHS blood and transplant support. Harmeet Gill, a trustee of the Gurdwara, described how they took on board the legacy of Guru Nanak and all the Sikh Gurus who devoted their lives to humanity and sacrificed their lives for the welfare of others. So they decided to start a conversation amongst the community to dispel the fears, myths, and misinformation that surrounds organ donation. Gurdwaras have also been very active in this advocacy and in terms of promoting organ donation. Guru Nanak Darbar Gurdwara Gravesend has been very active in this. I know my time's running up. Conclusion-wise, guided by a wish to relieve suffering, a sense of altruism and love for social action, younger members of the community have become very proactive in their advocacy for organ donation. They have recognized the role that Gurdwaras can play in educating the community on important issues, and this is their seva via mind. Providing such knowledge and education is altruistic and selfless because it benefits the whole community. And I think it's important to note that as the young take up leadership positions within their Gurdwaras, they will become important influencers in this debate because they recognize the impact of chronic conditions such as diabetes, heart disease, etc., which may result in a need for transplant. The above campaigns highlight the positive outcome of health providers collaborating with community and religious leaders and their organizations to influence and educate a community about organ donation. On a final note, I think it's important to note how these conversations on organ donation have led to follow-up conversations on other health conditions that may lead to the need for organ donation in the future, i.e. heart disease, obesity and diabetes. And I know Professor Gertch Randhawa will be speaking after me and he'll probably highlight this a little bit more. But in light of this, maybe it's time for Gurdwaras to reflect on how they can help improve their congregation's health, i.e. help reduce people's cholesterol and blood pressure levels through reducing sugar and salt in food and increasing fruit vegetable consumption in the langar provided. Thank you.
Dr. Jagbejyoti Johal, thank you so much for your contribution as ever to the British Sikh Report. It's always helpful to have your explanation of the primary issues that are affecting the Sikh community. So thank you so much for your time. I'm now going to turn to Tan Desi MP. I'm going to invite Tan Desi to say a few words. Tan Desi is MP for Slough and he is the Shadow Minister for Transport. Tan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jasveer, and it's a pleasure to be joining you once again. I know this is your 8th report, the 8th British Sikh Report, and I think I have been to many of them, if not most of the report launches. You know, I want to congratulate all of your team, in particular Jagdev Singh Verdi, I know, who's the editor and the lead statistician. He's a very, very good friend, and I know that having worked internationally, he is a well-known and respected statistician, and that is why I know that the likes of us as people in public life, elected representatives, we need that data and we want to be able to rely on data in order to make more informed decisions. And indeed, as I noted at a previous event organized by yourself, that one of the initiatives that I was heading up in terms of a National Sikh War Memorial in central London, and we are making significant progress on that, but it is a painstaking exercise given that we want to have a memorial in the centre of London in Westminster, for which we're getting a lot of support from the Mayor's Office and the Westminster Council and others. But within that, it was brilliant that within the British Sikh Report that we were able to see that more than 90% were in favour, and that you know, gave more power to the campaign as well. In terms of some of the issues that you highlighted within the British Sikh Reports, one of them was very eloquently highlighted just now by Dr. Jagbejyoti Johal in terms of organ donation. That is very, very important to the likes of myself. I have been involved in various events. In Parliament, we held an event, thanks to Anita Sandhu and others, wherein we invited Punjabi singers who we had encouraged earlier, you know, to get involved in Angdan Karo, which is basically to donate one's organs. And they were duly recognised in Parliament for their excellent work in trying to get a vast majority of the people involved and thinking of it as something which is a noble act. And so that's why it was brilliant to see that the majority of Sikhs, and I think I read somewhere it was about that 60% are happy to donate their organs, and 2/3 think of it as seva, which is brilliant. Well, amongst all of the various things, you know, that was more serious. And one of the things I went away straight for is your political analysis. It was a pleasure being a Labour Member of Parliament to see in facts and figures something which the likes of myself would have known to be true or to be a reality, in that the Labour Party is still the #1 party in terms of the electorate, and that is more so for young people, I know, than those who may be retired. But overall, it was good to see those figures because once again, it puts facts and figures to what is our anecdotal or our door canvassing analysis. So that is very, very important, and that helps us also to make more informed decisions about our campaigning. That we see weaknesses, but we also see our strengths as well. In terms of some of the other issues that have been highlighted by the report, mental health issues, in terms of loneliness, in terms of the analysis on disability, that is very, very important as well. In terms of marriages, I know that about 40% was said that they have had arranged marriages, but I know that that's something else that we need to look at as well, because the concept of arranged marriages itself has changed over time. So whereas before it would have been arranged as in where partners from our grandparents' generation, they may not even have seen each other, to now it is an arranged marriage whereby the families introduce couples, but to all intents and purposes, it's like a matchmaking service. It could just as well be Shaadi.com or being introduced by a family and by friends. But nevertheless, it was important to see that your figures around sex education in schools was very, very important, because I know that for certain faith communities, they were more averse to that. But it was good to see that within the Sikh community, that for most people, they were in support of sex education within school. And let us not forget that I think for many individuals out there, or parents, and I'm a parent of 2 young children, we know that their access to the internet and other such devices means that they are way ahead of where we think their education in terms of sensitive issues it really is. But the figures that you've come up with, hopefully those can now be relayed to the media organizations and to others within the Sikh community, so that they can actually see where the pulse of the Sikh people is. But overall, absolutely brilliant report. Thank you so much for the amazing work that all of you do. And I know that Jasveer, as a chair, it's not just yourself and those on the panel, that there is a huge team of individuals who are duly acknowledged within the back cover of your report. So my thank you to all of them. Many of them are very good friends, and I've known them for years. So it's a pleasure to be thanking friends, and it's a pleasure, as I said at the outset, to be amongst friends and to be commending you on your excellent work. Very, very well done. And no doubt the likes of Seema and myself will continue to rely on your support and your statistics in our life and in our work within public life. Thank you.
Tam, thank you so much, and thanks again for joining us. As you've said, I think you have come to virtually every single launch over the last 8 years, so I really appreciate your continuing support with the British Sikh Report. And you're absolutely right, none of this work would be possible without the hard work and effort of the entire British Sikh Report team. And we're just very lucky and fortunate to have the support of such esteemed individuals who are able to give their time and volunteer their time and efforts to ensure that the British Sikh Report remains a robust document of quantitative data. So Tam, thank you so much. Seema, I'll come to you now. So I'm now going to introduce Seema Malhotra, MP. Seema is the MP for Feltham and Heston, and she is also the Shadow Minister for Employment. Seema.
Thank you very much, Jasveer. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. I just want to say what a pleasure it is to join tonight, and also to follow my very good friend, Han, who is still a trailblazer to all of us, I think, in his work in Parliament, and to follow his recognition and support for your work. And I think appreciation is another word that I would like to use, because your work really does, as you have noted before, contribute to directly the debates that we have in Parliament, and how we're able to share and discuss and reflect the views from within the Sikh community across Britain. I want to also appreciate the way that you have managed to put together such an important and influential report on some important and also difficult issues that, in a sense, shine a light on what we have to continue doing, COVID or no COVID, and continue to recognise and to move forward on, because life cannot stop with the pandemic. What we need to do is to adjust and to keep our focus still on the areas that really matter. I want to thank Jagbir as well for the talk just given on organ donation. One of the first issues I campaigned on when I came into Parliament was improved donation, bone marrow donation, and also support for blood transplants, and the importance of engaging ethnic minority communities in that, because in order to have a good match, you also need to have a much more diverse range of donors. And so without that engagement, it is also our communities that do less well when it comes to support that can be given to them for their health and their health improvement. I also want to just acknowledge the scale of work, the fact that you had almost 3,000 responses, and that this is a labour of love that goes on year after year, your 8th report, and also that you've managed to publish this year, which I know with the data that was pre-COVID, if I remember from last year, you launched around the time that we had the National Sikh Awareness and History Month, and that it was an important part of that month and able to feed directly into the debate that we were able to have just towards the end. And I very much hope that as things improve and we're able to move forward a bit more in Parliament, and particularly post-lockdown, that we may think about being able to call for a debate and to discuss some of the issues in your report today. I want to just acknowledge as well the incredible work that has gone on by Gurdwaras and so many within the community across the country. I'll just highlight one example that I was very moved by. Mr. Jagsaran, who's an estate agent in Cranford, working with those that are active within Pingalwara, UK, and as well as continuing the fundraising and donations to support the work of Pingalwara, that they also walked about 1,000 miles and raised funds, which led directly to over £30,000 being raised, with pieces of equipment, particularly one new piece of equipment that's now in Ealing Hospital, that's able to support the health of post-COVID patients, and can simultaneously do the heart scans as well as blood clot detection. And when you look at post-COVID illness that isn't yet fully understood, and you look at long COVID, and you know within the sort of whole area of West London and up to Slough, that we have minority ethnic communities that have been hit harder by the pandemic than others. This was a huge achievement. And he was able to do it as well and make that happen because of, you know, 2 Sikh doctors as well at Ealing Hospital, one of whom, Dr. Kuna, was also very supportive in explaining the importance of that equipment to me. And I raise this because it is another example of that kind of extension of Seva, that is how these were people across the country who couldn't walk together, but who walked themselves, and often elderly people. And a true example of how keeping yourself well and making sure that you can still contribute to others is part of the Sikh values in action. So I do just want to, before I close, just make just a comment about why I think this report will continue to make a difference. it's because the issues that it also raises around loneliness, around education, around community have become almost more important in this COVID time, because the things that we talk about have been accelerated by COVID in many different ways. And the importance of community, of sharing, of being able to practice faith, of the importance of being able to have places of worship that people can, attend safely, and how they feel that is so much part of day-to-day living. It isn't an extra for one day in the week. It is part of how we live our lives and how we connect with each other. And the work that's gone on through the Gurdwaras working together for ensuring COVID-safe opening, for having Langar to be supporting food banks, donating thousands of meals. This has been a tremendous offer and kind of achievement that I think has kind of showcased in another way the contribution of the Sikh community to life in Britain, and why it has made a difference for so many, regardless of who they are and their backgrounds. So I thank you and I congratulate you. These debates and these comments and the views will shed a light and contribute to our debates in Parliament, but also are sources of great pride and appreciation for all of us in the contribution that it has made and the contribution of the Sikh community to our lives in Britain. Thank you.
Seema, thank you so much. And again, just like Tan, you've been a strong supporter of the British Sikh Report from its very early days. And we really appreciate all of the support, as well as the kind words that you've given about the British Sikh Report. And we do hope that we can continue to provide that information that guides those who are in the Houses of Parliament, who are able to then discuss issues affecting the British Sikh community at large. So thank you for joining us. I'm now going to hand over to Professor Gurch Randhawa, last but in no means least. Professor Randhawa is a Professor of Diversity and Public Health and Director of the Institute for Health Research at the University of Bedfordshire. Professor Randhawa, over to you.
Thank you and good evening to everybody. I've been penciled in to play the sweeper role, if anybody knows that about football. I sort of was going to make sort of observations and comments, a bit more challenging when most of the territory has been so eloquently covered by our esteemed speaker panel. So firstly, let me just thank everybody for pulling together such a wonderful evening. I think it's always good to see the evidence base in front of us. My first point really is about data. You can't make intelligent decision-making or policy-making without data. So I think, hats off to all of the wonderful individuals and organizations who are pulling together such valuable data that's going to help us to make informed decision-making. And I think this is vitally important in the context of religion. We already struggle as a country to pull together data around ethnicity. So I think, the fantastic contribution that this report makes in pulling together data specifically around religion cannot be overstated. This is the way we as a country need to go. And I would really encourage, more organizations to try and collate data in this way, collate surveys from their respective faith communities. I'm sure many other communities of faith would be very keen to pull together this kind of resource. I think it's a real exemplar. So congratulations to you. My other 2 points really are around wider determinants and life course. So I'm a public health professor. I would say that everything in your sort of daily life impacts upon your health. So I think, again, this report has really started to underscore the importance of things like education, housing, crime, loneliness, aging. All of these issues impact upon your health. So we shouldn't think about these things, especially health, just in terms of your access to your GP or access to hospital. And this is why the life course approach is so important. So as Jagbir quite rightly predicted, I'm bound to talk about this. Your childhood decision-making and then your decision-making as a young adult like it or lump it, will impact upon your healthcare as you age. So although, and I say this as guilty as everybody else, although we all think, you know, we're going to live forever and we can eat and drink whatever we want, I'm afraid life catches up with you. So I cannot emphasize the importance of trying to prevent as many things as we can. So as best as we can as parents, you know, it's really important to give our children healthy diets, especially during COVID. You know, we've got to keep active. And that means both in terms of our physical activeness, but also our mental agility as well. So our mental well-being is vitally important. So thinking about Gurdwaras, I think they have a vital role to play in both our mental fortitude and also our physical fortitude. And I've seen some great examples now of Gurdwaras who are really beginning to take this to their Sangat and step up to this. So, you know, congratulations to you all, but we've got so much more work to do. You know, the data for not just the Sikh community, but the wider Black and South Asian communities is not in our favor at the moment. You know, we are disproportionately affected by a range of health and social care issues. And I always say to people, you know, I would love to focus on issues that aren't to do with inequalities in health. But at the moment, COVID has really shone a light on this. So please, 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 all of you, continue doing all the wonderful work you're doing. And we as a community, we can make such a huge difference. Thank you so much.
Gertch, thank you so much for your words and for ensuring that we leave this British Sikh Report launch for London and the south of England, thinking about the impact that health conditions, that our health generally, that the disparities that exist between communities, being very mindful of that. And also the fact that age does catch up with us. And so we should be very careful about how we are living our lives now and the impact it has in the future. Gertch, thank you so much. We've also received a message from the Minister for Faiths, who has said that although he's been unable to join us this evening, he hopes that the launch event has been a success and he looks forward to reading the contents of the report very soon. All that remains to me to do is to thank everyone who's attended today, all of the speakers. I'd like to thank all of the hard work that's been going on in the background from the British Sikh Report team. So my thanks go to Jagdev Singh Virdi, to Dr. Jagbejyasri Johal, to Manira Wilson MP, to Tandesi MP, Seema Malhotra MP, and to Professor Gertch Randhawa. Thank you also to everyone who's attended this evening. We hope that you enjoy reading the British Sikh Report, and we look forward to your continued support in the future. Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Cheers.